Welcome to tonight's edition of Resistance TV. This evening we're going to be talking about the role of grassroots media and how it's really transforming the landscape, really. Back in the 1960s, Malcolm X once said that the media is the most powerful entity on earth because it has the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And he said that was because they control the minds of the masses. But we now have an opportunity, and have had for some time now, to fight back, thanks to the advent of social media and the online platforms that are springing up and giving an alternative perspective. And this evening, we were hoping to have three guests, and one of them may still join us, but we've not been able to reach her. And that is ANdrea Faulkner, who's involved in local radio, community radio. And we've also got Paul Knaggs, who many viewers will be familiar with, who runs Labour Heartlands, and Alan Davies, who's involved in the Word newspaper, which again, people perhaps seen online. It's also been produced in a hard copy, and they plan to actually get it back in the shops once the COVID-19 crisis has sufficiently died down to enable distribution to begin in earnest. So perhaps if we could just kick off with you, Alan, and just talk us through a little bit about your efforts and your team's efforts to roll out this new newspaper, because it's quite an ambitious plan that you've got. And we know that even the mainstream newspapers who are backed by billionaires have been struggling with circulation. So can you just talk us through what the thinking was behind launching the Word and how things are going now in terms of your ability to penetrate the market?
Well, we started nearly 5 years ago when Jeremy Corbyn was going for the leadership. The first idea I actually had for this was in the 1980s, because the media was just as virulent then. But we actually started it properly. We went on social media, which made it possible to find like-minded people, which we couldn't before. It had been impossible to go across the various CLPs. The idea of it is lots and lots of very insignificant people, and you know, I'm one of them, doing a very little amount of work, and all those people coming together, if well enough organised, we can produce a newspaper. Mainstream media is having a tough time, and I'm really cried when I heard that the Sun newspaper had were millions in the red. So we're doing better than the Sun, because we're just about breaking even. So we
the feedback that I've been getting, I mean, I've been giving it a bit of a push on my social media platforms, and the feedback that I've been getting from people has been really positive. I guess the key thing really now is how we can kind of grow the circulation, because I think
the interesting thing, Chris, is when we put it in the shops before, what we didn't realise, being naive, even though I'd kind of run a news agent for 5 years and I thought I knew about distribution, what I didn't realise is how they've got it sewn up. It's a cartel. The only main distributors in this country are Smith's Menzies. Now, Smith's Menzies, depending where you live in the country geographically, are the only people you can deliver it with. Now, we went with the same distributor as the Morning Star, which was the Mirror Group. And the Mirror Group, not really on our side. You know, it shouldn't have come as a surprise to us, but the Mirror Group had that really awful headline a few years ago, Corbyn must go. You know, instead of showing any solidarity, it was Corbyn must go, which was, I thought, was pretty awful. So the Mirror Group deliberately didn't distribute it as well as they could. For instance, at one Labour conference, there were no papers in Liverpool where the conference was held, but little villages in Surrey and Sussex and Essex had hundreds of papers in village news agents where only about 10 houses were. So we realised quite quickly that if we were going to come back, we'd have to come back and produce our own network of distribution, which we've now done. We were ready to do that. We had some union money, but some of the unions dictated to us who we were allowed to talk to or speak to, and we told them that's not solidarity, guys. It weren't quite those words, but as you know, when we did the Peterloo event last year, you were no platform by all the right wing, which was absolutely disgusting. So we've kept going. We're doing it on as PDF forms at the moment. And I'd like to show you, if I can, share the screen and show you the latest edition on PDF.
Just before you do that then, Alan, let me just bring in some of our other guests and just get some preliminary from them, if you don't mind. Then we'll come back to that and talk about that in a little bit more detail. And I'm pleased to say that ANdrea Faulkner has now been able to join us. latecomer to the party. Welcome, ANdrea. I don't know if you're not muted, are you? Can you say hello? Can we hear you? I think you might be muted, ANdrea. You have to unmute yourself.
I think am I unmuted now?
We can hear you now.
Fantastic. Apologies for the late sort of arrival, but my computer was playing up.
You're fashionably late and you've made a big impact.
Oh, fabulous.
We were just doing some preliminaries, really. Alan was just talking about the origins of the word newspaper that he's involved with developing, and I'm just about to go to Paul Knaggs from Labour Heartlands, and then really interested to hear from you when Paul spoke and ANdrea. I'll just give you time to collect your thoughts for a moment about community radio and the role that can play in ensuring that there is an alternative voice out there to the mainstream, which often doesn't reflect what is actually happening on the ground. And one of the ways in which I think the media, the people that control the media anyway, are very adept at not only, as it were, distorting the truth and the news and smearing people, is come to that and even lying about people. Another thing that is done is just simply ignore issues and don't give it any coverage at all. And this is where I think kind of community radio can have a big role to play. But perhaps talk about that in a few moments after we've just
certainly when you're ready for me, Chris. Yes, I'll come in. Shall I mute myself now?
No, you don't need to. No. Just feel to jump in as and when. But let me just bring in Paul Knaggs now, who is behind the Labour Heartlands online platform, which has quite a significant penetration actually, and certainly I think a lot of people who are watching tonight will be very familiar with it. But Paul, you've been I don't know how long you've been running Labour Heartlands for now, but it's been really successful in actually reaching substantial numbers of people, hasn't it? So what was your thoughts about getting it going, and what's the main kind of raison d'etre in terms of your thinking about setting it up in the first place? What is it? What market are you trying to appeal to in the material that you put out?
Yeah, we started in 2017. Alternatively, we were a voice for the left-wing Leave groups. We were Corbynites and Bennites, and we put a left-wing Leave alternative view forward so that we could get, so that democracy could function properly without having a one-sided view, especially with the Remain campaigns as they were. I mean, we must understand that in 2016, we had both the Tories and the Labour Party campaigning to Remain. However, we saw it fit that we should extend the voice of the left. I mean, we had 5 million Leave voters that were left-wing supporters. And so we created Labour Heartlands. Since then, what we've done is we've developed it into a news opinion outlet, and we tried to stay true to our working class roots and speak for the left and the working class as much as we possibly can.
Was that one of the driving forces behind establishing it in the first instance, Paul? The fact that working class voices weren't being given a platform in the mainstream?
Well, in our opinion, yes. I mean, and even today, I mean, the working class voice is not given any outlet really when it comes to the mainstream press. I mean, The Guardian, I'm not sure if we can class that as a working class voice. Well, we know we can't. It speaks more to the middle class liberals. And there's not much outside of the internet and outlets like The Word, for example, that does speak for the working class. And it's important that we maintain a voice, even if it is with these fledgling grassroots media outlets such as Labour Heartlands, The Word, and others. I mean, the Canary's great, there's quite a few others, Evo Politics, and they all do speak or try to speak for the working class. I think basically because they are the working class people that have set up these outlets. And it's important that, as I say, the working class not only have a voice, but the working class are involved as well. So yeah, I mean, fundamentally, this is what we're trying to do now, carry on that voice and carry on speaking for not just our readers, but the wider working class throughout the UK.
And what sort of reach are you achieving?
Well, to be quite honest, I mean, we are blowing our own trumpet, and we use good social media outlets, I must say, good Facebook groups and good Facebook pages. Sometimes we can, I mean, at best, we've gone out to 7-8 million in a week. which is really good. I mean, but that has been in the height of the Brexit debates, obviously, because of the way we stand, and we were ultimately looking at Brexit on a left-wing platform. Lots of readers looked at our opinion and read up on it. However, we're still going out to 2 and 3 million week in, week out.
And it's free to use, I understand.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it does cost. I mean, the word I'll tell you, it costs a lot of money to keep these sites online, to keep them running. Even for images we use or videos, you know, we have to pay sometimes. However, we do get donors, you know, and sometimes these donors, it might be £1, it might be £2, sometimes it might be £20 a month, but it does keep us running. I mean, we're really grateful that we do get donors that are prepared to put their hands in their pockets and help us out this way.
And what about people who might want to kind of contribute to the word, in terms of contribute content to it? I mean, are all comers welcome to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have a guest platform, and we enjoy articles from again the working class, you know, and their opinions. And we've had some excellent articles, and you know, that these have been normal people out there that have wrote about their opinions even during the coronavirus outbreak and lockdown, how they felt about being confined, etc. during the lockdown period. And they've gone down well. They've gone down well on Twitter. They've gone down well on Facebook. People like to read about other people and their experiences, especially people, again, I'll use that word, amongst the working class. We all like to know that we're united and we've got solidarity, and we can always learn from other people's experience. Yeah, it's been very successful, our guest outlet. You can go onto the site and just contact us with any articles that you want printing. We'll review and proof them and print them.
Right. Well, let me bring in ANdrea then, because you're involved in community radio, and I think that's really important innovation. I mean, we've had local radio now for some time with the BBC and the commercial output, as well as the main BBC outlets and major commercial outlets. But one of the things I was particularly interested in relation to community radio, as we try to build a new grassroots movement, is the opportunity that provides to local communities to be able to kind of speak to each other and to share ideas and messages, and to kind of help us, as it were, build the movement. And before you joined us, ANdrea, I was just quoting what Malcolm X said about the media when he said in the 1960s, it's the most powerful entity on earth because it has the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And he went on to say that is because they control the minds of the masses. But we've now got, through the advent of social media and the internet, the opportunity to provide a different voice to the mainstream in that sense. So it's maybe not quite as easy as it once was to control the minds of the masses as it was in Malcolm X's day in the 1960s. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about community radio and your experience and how easy or difficult it is for local groups around the country to establish their own community radio platforms.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me on as well. And I'm coming from a bit of a different perspective than from the left-wing media, sort of building a left-wing media perspective, because I'm a presenter on a community radio station that is actually Ofcom regulated. So obviously from the left wing, or if you were right wing, we have to adhere to the Ofcom regulations of being unbiased. And although I'm very well known on the show that I present, called The Community Voice, to be left wing, I have a co-presenter who actually brings in a different angle as well, so that we can have that debate. And the whole reason for me joining the radio station in the first place was actually to bring to a local grassroots level policies that were going on across the country that were affecting people at grassroots level. So we discuss local policies from local council, from county council through to national policies. We put questions out on a weekly basis to the audience and ask them what they think about particular policies or a particular. For example, the statues at the minute is a big issue for everybody. It's really come to the forefront of people's minds, some of these statues being of slave owners and things like that. So we've done shows around that, and we're asking people's public opinion so that we can get that debate going. And the whole reason for me to do that was because I didn't believe that people were given the opportunity, for one, to join that debate, but the information being provided through the mainstream media it was one-sided. Although it's Ofcom regulated itself, apart from the paper media, all of the media is Ofcom regulated if they're under Ofcom. I didn't feel that it was actually, there was a balance going on. So I felt that I needed to present something to people at a local level where they could take part in that debate.
I mean, if there was, local activists viewing this tonight or maybe on YouTube afterwards, who are interested in establishing their own community radio platform, how easy or difficult is it to do that? I mean, is it expensive? Is it something that's realistic that local communities could actually achieve?
I think it's very realistic. Every single town I'm aware of has its own grassroots community station. They're right across the country. You need individuals, like any project, you need experts in different fields to set a project up. So from my own point of view, from the technical side, I wouldn't know how to set a radio station up. But there's individuals who are part of the radio station who know everything to do with the technical side. I come from a perspective where I was asked if I would come on to a show on the station because of my political activism in the community, because I was always setting up groups, I was always knocking on people's doors, I was asking people if they want to set up a community group in their small little areas, because I found locally that there was certain local areas without any representation or any voice. So I started knocking on people's doors, and I just so happened to knock on one of the directors' doors of Sound Radio that I present on, and he asked me to come on a show on the radio station. So I said, yeah, that's great. I'll talk about my activism. I'll talk about what I do. And then I was asked if I'd like to do a show. So I think what we need to realize is that you can actually take part in forms of different media, no matter what your background is. Find your local station, go and speak to the directors, ask because most community radio stations will be happy to have people come along and have their voices heard. And we've worked with people in Birmingham. We've linked up. My show has linked up with shows in Birmingham, in London. We've linked up with Alan in Oldham. So we do actually, although we're Ofcom regulated, because our show tries to have that balance, we can link in with other shows across the country. So I'm just doing things a little bit differently.
So where does the funding come from then, ANdrea? I mean,
for the station.
Yeah,
for the station itself.
If you want something up for the first time, notwithstanding there might be a local community radio station in the particular community there, people are interested in getting their voice heard, and they may be able to piggyback onto that. But where there isn't one, I mean, are there grants available? I mean, just how easy or difficult is this sort of thing to achieve?
I think from starting from scratch, Chris, I think as any project, anybody involved in community projects, they're not it's not just as easy as setting something up. You have to find the grant funding, haven't you, for equipment, and to set yourself up, you need a satellite pole, and you need all your computer equipment and your decking. So
where people can go to find out that information, or is there any sort of obvious places where that information would be available?
I think with any grant funding, I think you'd have to just Google use a search engine, should I say, for grant funding for media. community local media. Unfortunately, I've not had any involvement in setting the station up.
Right.
I've not had it. I don't have any involvement in the technical side. I just have involvement as in presenting to the public.
What's the kind of penetration of becoming a community radio like yours then into the local community that it serves?
My show actually reaches around 2,000 people at any one time.
Right.
When it goes out, because it goes out live on Facebook, but it also goes out live on air.
Yeah.
We will reach more people once we go fully, because we've been given Ofcom status. Then we can now reach out once we go fully Ofcom, because we're not at the minute until we're prepared.
Right.
But once everything's in place, then we'll reach thousands of people right across North Wales.
Yeah.
At the minute, my show is reaching about 2,000 at some points. So it's a good base to start with. Sure. But it's good to start that very, very localized information, so that you can.
One of the things that we've set
what's
out
going on locally.
I mean, one of the things that we've set out in the Festival of Resistance's aims and objectives is to promote kind of community activities and community arts and community radio. So we'll be very keen, and that's one of the things we want to try and judge how successful or otherwise this movement is being a year or 18 months or so, to see how successful we've been able to be in promoting and facilitating those kind of things. So people like yourself and your expertise, I think, will be invaluable in helping us to roll that out and to encourage other people in different communities to, take this on and to actually build this alternative platforms, which are so important to getting the voices of
local people here.
Local people out in the wider area.
It's very localized, mine, Chris. So it's not, a massive broad church it's very localized. Examples of guests, we have a guest or two guests on every week. Each guest is a representative within North Wales communities, carrying out lots of different sorts of activities. We've interviewed the MPs for our local area. We've interviewed candidates up to the general electing campaign. We interviewed 8 of the local candidates from 2 separate constituencies. Yeah. So we interviewed them so that we could actually give the local people within our area an idea of who these individuals were. They got the opportunity to ask them local candidates questions. We've had Brexit debates on there. I think Paul was on about, reaching out around. I mean, that was big. The Brexit debate one was quite a big one, because it's really sort of a hot potato, wasn't it? Especially a year or so ago. Yeah. But we also have representatives from different community groups, and they tell us what they're doing. So we pass on information to people. So I'm hoping it empowers people as well.
Yeah. Alan, you were going to, I think, share some of the...
Yeah, if I may, I'll just share the screen if it's set up, and just show you what the paper. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the last PDF edition.
It's very professionally produced then.
Yeah, well, I think it's as good as any other tabloid. We've got some professional designers, but everyone who writes for us is a volunteer. And the idea is to get as many people as possible together. Again, it's from the working class, and we kind of like to cooperate with anyone who will cooperate with this. And we do extensively with Paul, and we feel the same about the referendum as Paul does. But yeah, we've got people who are on both sides of it. So we've got people who write for us. This is an interesting column there. Satan's own Aunt Maggie. It's her agony column from Beyond the Grave. So you can ask her anything you want. If you look at that properly, it's a kind of political joke one. There's things that you get in the normal tabloids, but I'm getting here to the most popular article at the end that we've got Unity News there we did as well, but this is the most popular article. we've got this chef guy who, you know, we thought, well, if Chris Williamson's in there for the cooking, then the tourists will think, well, what is in there for the politics?
If anybody can't see that, if it's not big enough on your screen, that handsome-looking chap with the chef's hat in the top right-hand corner is actually me. Yeah, I mean, Alan asked me a while ago if I would be willing to do a column in there, providing a weekly vegan recipe, which I'm very pleased to do, having been a vegan for over 40 years.
That's what we do with there. We sell the PDF.
So you're covering sport. You got obviously cooking. You've got some quizzes in there, and then you got some.
We got some hardcore politics as well. So we, you know, when we talk about politics, we're not scared of talking about politics. So, you know, white lives matter, black lives matter, but no one's saying Palestinian lives matter. And I think that's something that we're probably the only ones that are saying that at the moment.
You are saying that.
We are definitely saying that as the annexations on Israel kind of going ahead and the West Bank is being swallowed up. That's going to be the headline of our next edition. We're not afraid to say what we think of Keir Starmer. In addition, before that, coming from a very much a sort of progressive socialist background, maybe democratic socialist. But if I just say a couple of things, if I can just plug ourselves, we started off. We got a group, the Word Supporters Group on Facebook. So anyone's welcome to join that. We vote on various articles, so it's quite democratic as well. We have various polls there and see what people think should go on there. Then we also got a website, thewordmedia.org, so you can donate on that. That's important because, like Paul said, we need to keep us going. So thewordmedia.org. The latest project that we've started off is our own social media kind of websites, because we were noticing that on Facebook lately, I mean, if you know, ANdrea said about Ofcom, but the trouble is they don't play by their own rules. And if you play by their rules, you do tend to lose. So we noticed a few weeks ago, there's something called shadow banning on Facebook and people aren't seeing the posts. So we started our own social media and we're trialing that out. That's called Kazki.com, Cazki. It's the Polish word for being busy, for doing things. We couldn't find a .com that were English words. So if someone wants to go on that, you know, you don't have to pay for that. Just go on it and hopefully we can build a community that's not controlled by an American media company.
Yeah, no, indeed.
You know, the whole idea is working together with anyone who will work together with us. Like you saw on there, we've got articles from Unity News. You know, we're involved with Paul and his group, and ANdrea writes for us and does the quizzes. And thank you, ANdrea. So it's like anyone who will write, keep their own identity, but, you know, anyone is welcome. And of course, we printed it as well. And I don't know if you can see that. That's a generic headline that you can put in any paper at any time. It says lying Tories.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one that we could do every week, really. But
so coming from definitely from a unapologetic left-wing prospectus, and I mean, unlike ANdrea in that sense, who in the radio station that she's involved with, where they have to, you know, give different perspective, you're giving an alternative.
We're our own group, Chris. That's the idea. So it's just lots of small people have got together and into forming one group on the Word Supporters Group, but we're in contact with anyone who'll work from us. They can use their own branding. You know, we work with anyone, and lots of different people will take a page in the paper. You know, we don't charge for that. If they're on our side, just go in the paper. That's great. And the more of us work together, the better. And we're, as I say, we set it up with the website at thewordmedia.org. We've got the Kazki.com, the social media site that I hope you'll all join and you find a way to get on it, Chris.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. I think the only way we'll ever win is if we come together, because you can't trust the other side. You can't trust the Tories.
Can I come in there just a second, Chris? Yeah. Because I think what we're building is actually a resistance to what we've been given for many, well, since time began with media, is only one perspective, whether you're Ofcom regulated or not. And at the end of the day, I think what Alan's doing is amazing, totally left-wing. That's what we need. We need a left-wing media. But if you can get into any other media outlets, then I think by doing that, you're still giving opportunities for people to have a voice. So I think, you know, from my perspective, although we are regulated, and I'd rather not be regulated, but I'm not on the board of directors, so it's not my choice, it's theirs. I respect their choice, but on my show, I've never ever had a complaint about my views. I'm very, very overtly left wing. I'm a socialist. I say that on my show. But we have to, like I said before, we have to get a balance of guests and the sorts of you know, discussions that we have. So I think the use of any media source is fantastic, as long as we can get that grassroots voice going, and to have a debate as well, because I think debate is a massive issue, especially today, because we're not debating, we are arguing in echo chambers, and that's not good for anyone. I think it's causing too much division, and I'm hoping that by using different types of media, whether that's regulated or not, if you can get into any type of media, have a voice. That's the main thing from my perspective, is community, grassroots people having a voice.
And also, if we all join together, then we can have one really big voice. And I think there's the figures coming up. Someone was saying about half the membership of the Labour Party have left in the last few months. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But if you think of all those thousands and thousands in the Labour Party, if we all got together and they created something, and they help with this, and they help with the radio, and they help with Heartlands, and they help with the Word, just think what we could all do together.
Yeah.
We don't need to be told. We can just go and do it. There's nothing stopping us.
I mean, given the advent of these alternative platforms, I'm just wondering, Paul, how influential do you think they're actually being now? I mean, you know, Chomsky is often quoted with his remarks about the manufacturing of consent, which the mainstream media are heavily involved in that. Do you think that still holds true, Chomsky's maxim about manufacturing consent, or do you think that alternative platforms like yours are beginning to break that down a little bit?
To be honest, I think we're breaking through between us all. I mean, there's plenty more out there. You know, we're just a small token amount of how many media outlets are out there. The left are really pushing this, and we've got the technology now to do it. I think, and the reality is that language is one of the greatest gifts ever given to humans. And how we use our language and how we create debate is a weapon against the establishment. We should be out there, we should be disrupting the status quo, we should be questioning everything. And you know, there's groups like the Word, Labour Heartlands, and others. We question things, we get debate going. We don't just go with a consensus, that's okay, yeah. We actually question things, and people start debating it, and it's only then that we can start changing things. So it's very important that people do participate, put their views forward, and I'm sure that we can break through the iron fist or the iron heel that keeps down the working class voice and stops our voices being heard, and change can happen this way.
And yet, we've just seen Boris Johnson's Tory party in the last general election winning a huge majority in the House of Commons. And obviously most of the media were not sympathetic to the Labour proposition in that election. So
the mainstream media's never been
the media's got to play in influencing or affecting the outcome of elections and the sort of political discourse and policy agenda that is ultimately adopted. We've seen the Black Lives Matter campaign has had a profound impact on the political classes at the moment anyway. They're certainly paying lip service to it, so it's certainly grabbed attention.
We're being drip fed. It's not just the mainstream media, but if you look at any film, it's always how the Americans won every war they were ever in. I'd love to see a film, Vietnam, the winner's story. That'd be a good one, wouldn't it? But we've been drip fed this, and we look towards these heroes. And the biggest heroes to me today in the media are people like Chelsea Manning, like Julian Assange, as we said at Peterloo. These are the real heroes. People who put their principles above everything else. And these are the people that we should have statues rather than to these pathetic, greedy, grasping slave traders. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more, Alan. You know, I think going back to what you were saying, Chris, with the election campaigns and, you know, us losing, Labour losing the election by a few million. I think that we are being drip fed, but in particularly through the media, but also through our education, throughout all our education. And we wrote that book on democracy, didn't we? We all wrote a different chapter, different people wrote different chapters in that book of grassroots democracy.
It's out and printed this weekend, guys. So
oh, fantastic. A worm's eye view of democracy, it's called, isn't it, Alan?
On the if you go to our website, you can order it from that. I'm sure we can order it from Chris. So
just
wordmedia.org. Yeah.
Sorry, yes. So that book, I think, if we can keep pushing, what my chapter within that book is all around education from secondary, high school being compulsory to teach democracy, and real democracy and our real history of democracy and how people campaigned and went on protests, and the suffragettes and the Peterloo, all these different things that people aren't taught in school. They need to be taught in our schools. And unless we can get into all these different types of avenues, not just media, then we're never going to win. Absolutely. So I think
the way in which we're going to be able to achieve that, though, Andrea, isn't it, is by getting our hands on the levers of power. And this is something that Jeremy Corbyn was obviously seeking to do. And one of the things that Jeremy set out in his programme was precisely what you just mentioned there about education and changing the curriculum and giving young people a broader perspective, talking about the real impact of the British Empire and colonialism. I mean, I think many people in this country still think the British Empire was on the whole, a civilizing and a positive effect around the world. When those of us who have kind of looked into it in a little bit more detail, know it was anything but that. It was a pernicious influence that ruthlessly abused and exploited, raped and pillaged essentially nations around the world. And you know, those communities are still suffering the consequences of it, are they not? But Paul, I mean, you often quote Fred Hampton, the inspirational leader of the Black Panther movement. I've heard you speak about him.
Yeah. Well, Fred's one of
the things that Fred said or stressed the importance of was revolutionary education. And what role do you think the Labour heartlands and these alternative media outlets that we now have on the internet are actually, what role are they playing in actually delivering that, or should they, or are they even doing that? Do you think?
Yes, they definitely should. What we try to do is we put news out, and what we also try to do is put some educational opinion out based on people like Fred Hampton or Tony Benn, for example. I mean, he's a great advocate of democracy and the working class, and we all know he's he's an upper class guy, you know. However, he was an advocate for the working class and democracy and equality. And it's important that we don't lose these teachings, and especially like people like Fred Hampton. You know, the guy was murdered when he was 21 years old, but for that short period of his life, he actually made a lot of sense about the masses, about capitalism and about socialism. And I like the fact that at that time, the Black Panthers were all about socialism. They were about everybody together fighting, as they called it, the man or the establishment. And they saw that the only way we could move forward was, as Fred Hampton said, you know, it doesn't matter if it's black working class or the black masses, the white masses, brown masses or yellow masses. We all fight together against capitalism. You know, that's the only way we can do it. Socialism against capitalism. And what we have to do is we have to maintain the voice that Jeremy Corbyn started and understand that it's a rigged system. So therefore, I think that media outlets like ours should continue to put out these educational pieces so people can read and maintain this left-wing agenda.
Do you think it's possible? I've had a question in from one of the viewers, actually another media outlet, actually, Unity News, is saying, how do left-wing media get parliamentary access and mainstream access without becoming part of the bubble and selling their souls? What do you think to that, Alan? I mean, you're...
Keep it on a voluntary basis. I think my problem is with all politicians, no offence, Chris, but I've always thought that we should go back to the old Chartist demand. And the only Chartist demand that wasn't met was one-year parliaments. So if someone's ensconced in the system and they do tend to have this decision to make, and the decision is it a good thing to do, or is it a good thing to me to do? Will it help my career? And the longer they're in the system, I think the worse they become. So I would change the whole system. What we've got is, we call parliamentary democracy, but it's actually evolved from the Norman French rule. It evolved from their dominion over us, and that's what we need to change. So one thing I say, how, in answer to your question, how they actually do that.
Yeah,
you can join the National Union of Journalists. They'll help you with training. They'll help you with finding various things. You know, they'll show you what it's all about. But keep it on a voluntary basis, and that would give you access to Parliament if you became a member. So you would be able to do that. They won't take you as seriously as they will one of their own, obviously. But I'd
back that view, Alan. I'd back the view of keeping things from that perspective on a voluntary basis, because I would back that view, really. Other people might have a different opinion to that, but from my point of view, I have my job, I have my paid role, and I have my activism, and I have my radio role, and I've got different roles in life. I'm you know, a wife and a parent and all these different roles. And I keep my activism very, very much on a voluntary basis, because I don't want to get entwined in that sort of need to actually keep on that activist role because I need an income. You know, I wouldn't want to get entwined into that. I never, ever wanted or would want to get involved on a political platform from a local council, county council basis, or any political basis from that.
Given the scale of the challenge that we're facing, though, Andrea and Paul and Alan, for that matter, I mean, you know, you've got very powerful media outlets, even though their circulation has diminished. The broadcast media is also incredibly influential. And, you know, I keep coming back to, you know, what Malcolm X said about being the most powerful entity on earth and controlling the minds of the masses. I mean, if we leave it on a voluntary basis, are we not just sort of...
Chris, it depends how well organised we can become. And the longer we do it, the better organised we are. And talking about the Black Panthers, one of the things they did to finance themselves was having a newspaper. And that worked a treat for them. That's what they actually did. Yeah, I think it's all about organisation. And to me, it's also about the form of cooperation. And cooperation almost died with Thatcherism. You know, remember on the steps of Downing Street, kind of making that hypocritical speech quoting St. Francis of Assisi, where there is...
I actually think...
We need to learn to bring cooperation together and organised cooperation in a way.
How can we insulate ourselves then, Paul? You know, because I think the what's behind this question is, I think, if the alternative media becomes, you know, very popular, gets a huge circulation, starts to then be able to kind of penetrate the corridors of power in that sense. How do you stop yourself becoming part of the establishment? What do we do? How do you insulate yourself? How do you kind of keep yourself rooted to your working class roots in that sense?
I think that's always very difficult. I mean, because we've seen politicians, haven't we, enter Parliament, and before you know it, they're just part of the establishment, you know? However, I think what's going to happen very soon is that, well, actually, it's already happened. Politicians have realised that social media and the influence that social media has and the outlets that we have influence people greatly because they can read an alternative view. And it won't be long before politicians start approaching media outlets like ours, The Word, etc., and trying to get their message across that way. I can guarantee that in 2024, the next general election, if it happens then, the main part and thrust of it will be on social media, because people like to talk to each other. People always like to talk, you know, that's what we do. And you know, so social media is going to be such an influence that politicians are going to start reaching out to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's already having a big impact, of course. I mean, the elections campaigns that are fought today and the way the modus operandi of politicians is very different, even from when I first was elected to Parliament back in 2010. But, you know, if you go back to the previous generation, before the advent of social media and the internet, you know, it's a very, very different animal, really. And now with this kind of 24-hour around-the-clock news cycle and the advent of social media, and one of the things that I was speaking to Mark Wadsworth, a activist who's been on the program a few times now, actually, but he's very supportive of the idea of citizen journalism, essentially people using these things, their smartphones, to capture events and to use them, to speak into them, to share that information to the world. And, you know, you sometimes, if something is very you know, significant or controversial, it can get a huge sort of buy-in from the wider general public. I mean, these things can go viral. You can get things going to, you know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
I think the thing that never ceases to amaze me is the good ideas that people have, and you can find them on the forums. And people come up with excellent ideas that then sometimes what we do is we collect those ideas and we put them out as articles. I was discussing with somebody about a statute of limitations, you know, talking about the statutes. Every 20 years or even 50 years, the town planners look at that statute of limitations and say, yeah, okay, we'll keep that statute for another 20 or 50 years. Because political landscapes change, views change, you know, and obviously as a civilization, we've changed. So, you know, I mean, it's quite right that we should remove slavers' statues. And if we had some sort of law put in place that said this, that the town halls would all look at their own statues and they would adjust and take down statues, put them in a museum. Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting we're melting things down or eradicating history. I'm just talking about the ones on display, just as you would have planning permission for anything. It will be reviewed every 20, 50 years.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, I wonder whether the pressure would have been as great on the establishment to, you know, change its attitude in relation to some of these issues, were it not for the fact that many of these incidents are and movements are captured on social media and shared around. And, you know, that toppling of the statue in Bristol, for example, wasn't captured by the mainstream.
That's the beauty of social media, because I've just said that. Somebody else could articulate that better. They could be more coherent with it. They could put that to their MP. That could be a motion that goes forward, and we could see that happening. Because social media is able to change things politically and physically like that. And it's the passing of information and ideas that we do so well. Before, we only had pubs to talk into and social places, you know, and those ideas would stay there. Now those ideas can be spread so easily. And that's why the Word and Labour Heartlands and other outlets and the radio stations are so important to communities. Because that word is not kept within a small area, it's spread throughout.
It's a big mountain to climb, though, isn't it? Because there's a major job, I believe, for us to do. And I'm hoping that the alternative outlets like yourselves, and indeed others for that matter, will be a
one
big
caveat on that, Chris.
To shape and change attitudes. Because I think we need to, do we not? And what role do you think you can play or should be playing in raising expectations and raising political consciousness in the country?
Chris, there's really one point I really have to make on this. When we started, and the idea of a printed paper was an anathema to most people, but now social media, we're all being digitized in every form possible. Paul talked about in local pubs. Now we're going to have to tell people if we ever go in a local pub and register with it. The big American internet firms can turn us off at any time they like. So we might have to think of other ways of social media. There's always already this thing, this shadow posting, where you think people are seeing it and they're not, and we've tested that out. So we have to be very, very careful about.
I was going to come on to that, Alan, actually, as we sort of draw to the program towards the end now, with about 8 or 9 minutes left, because the establishment have been adept through the ages at actually closing down any kind of popular movement that threatens the status quo. And I'm thinking back to the movement that you're very involved in Manchester. You know, Peterloo massacre was commemorated, the 200th anniversary was commemorated last year, which you were involved in organising. And of course, the aftermath of that was the potential modern day equivalent to what the establishment might try to do if people like yourselves become too influential in terms of closing down your platform online. Perhaps you could just say a little bit about that, Alan, about how history could repeat itself. Because what did they do? Just tell us, Alan, what happened in the aftermath of the Peterloo?
It's interesting is that in Peterloo that they organised and they drilled on that. The ordinary people, the mill workers, right, we're not going to have any violence. We make sure, so we drill all of us to make sure we're disciplined, but it didn't do any good. After Peterloo, some of the middle class journalists in Manchester got together and they started The Guardian. But The Guardian was always a middle class organisation. And if you look at some of the early copies of The Guardian, they were always kind of, we want a bit more freedom, but not too much. We're scared of that. It was always like that. Yeah. So I think the only thing we can do is not have any leaders, not have any people that want a career in it. And there's plenty of us who don't want to be councillors and MPs and whatever. So just ordinary people coming together is the only way. And modern times you can organise better because there are phones there, you know, there's the internet and whatever. But I really think that we're going to maybe have to go back to almost the early days. If you remember your history, the Peasants' Revolt, and it was priest John Paul that was doing these rhyming couplets, and that kind of worked. And you got thousands then.
Alan, I was going to go back to, I was going to make that point exactly, because where I come from my perspective, should I say, we need to go back to true grassroots activism, where it starts in your communities. So you start engaging again politically with people in your communities. That political engagement was lost in the 80s after Thatcher. She broke everybody. She broke our communities. I remember as a teenager and as a child, our communities being quite political. As I grew into my 20s and 30s, all that went. Nobody was political anymore. We weren't talking about politics. We weren't interested in what was going on in Parliament.
But isn't that's what the establishment always want to do, though, don't they?
Yeah, try and break that. So I think from the grassroots perspective, and just I'll do my final thing, is that go out into your community and actually start talking. And if there is a community radio station locally, go to the community radio station, contact them online, however you can contact them, and say, oh, you know, I'm interested. Can I present, or can I come on one of your shows? And it might grow from there. And then you've got Paul and Alan who do things from a different perspective. But it's all about engagement, isn't it? And getting that debate going again and getting people engaged again.
I'm hopeful that these alternative media outlets, platforms will inspire, you know, people to come forward. I mean, the Peterloo rally, 200 years ago. I mean, they were talking about promoting freedom of speech and political representation, and were massacred for their troubles. And the pamphleteers and the rest of it that were part of that movement, there were then measures taken against them to make that more difficult. And I just worry that potentially the powers that be may seek, and we're already seeing some evidence of that, efforts to minimise and in fact Alan has just mentioned it, minimise the reach of these alternative progressive platforms like The Word and like Labour Heartlands. Although Labour Heartlands seem to be still doing very well in terms of the penetration that you're getting. Isn't that right, Alan? Paul, you were saying?
Yeah, I think there's another thing.
Not been clamped down just yet.
now. It has been at times, but I think there's another thing that we should be doing as well. We should be trying to disrupt politics, but also we should be listening to people. When we put an article out, I like to go on the forums. I like to look what people are saying. And it's very important, this, and I think it's missing in politics in general. We've stopped listening to the working class and what they want. And I'd hate to think that we just put articles out that we want to put out. And that's why I think that more activism and involvement from the general public is important in all that we do. And it does come down to community as well, and the wider community that is the left and socialism. And only that way, when we disrupt things, listen to each other, can we build a consensus to move forward with a coherent vision.
I had a question actually from a viewer for you, Alan. Bob Walker's saying, does the word only support the Labour Party?
No, I'm still a member just of the Labour Party, but probably won't be after this. Obviously, Chris has no platform. No, we've got members who are anarchists. We've got one member who's in a Liberal Party. We've got a few Greens. It's the broad left. The difference is it's people. It's not people who want to be politicians and make a career. It's people who want to make a difference.
Yeah. And Paul, perhaps in conclusion, how do you see the future panning out for Labour heartlands in terms of where it goes next, and what's the next challenge for you?
We're just going to keep plugging away, to be quite honest. We have a mix of news, views and opinions, and we'll keep plugging away that way. We're finding it harder and harder to support Labour as a party because we feel that the party has now moved away from the Corbyn party that we supported. And, you know, just like the Heartlands themselves, they've moved away from the Labour Party. We feel, you know, that the Labour Party no longer represents the working class of the Heartlands, and Starmer's definitely moved it back to the centre ground. And that's not where the majority of members wanted to be. The big mistake is we kept the PLP. Like I say, we should have had open selection, but we kept the PLP, and the PLP doesn't represent
the Parliamentary Labour Party, if anybody who's not sure what that is.
Sorry, yeah.
But Andrea, perhaps maybe you could have the final word. I mean, you know, the biggest cohorts, something I've been passionate about for many, many years now, in every election, are the non-voters. And do you think there is, through your efforts and the efforts of people like Paul and Alan with their platforms, is there a way in which we can inspire and mobilize people to start becoming active in politics and take ownership of it and come through as, you know, get new working class leaders, so we get people who are genuinely fit for purpose, who can genuinely represent the people that elect them?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think where parliamentary leadership is concerned, it's very, very difficult because, like we've been saying about the issue of being paid and having to keep a job, and you know, it's difficult to balance a paid job with being a representative within your community. From my perspective, I would go back to the fact that we need strong community leaders, as we used to have when I was younger, who will actually lead within their communities and get that political discussion going again. I think what we've got to stop doing is being too much within echo chambers where we don't actually see the outside perspective sometimes, and sometimes the outside. Of course, with that comes on the social media side of that means that everybody's arguing rather than debating, I think. So I think we've got to get into the communities physically, and we have to talk amongst ourselves like we used to, instead of arguing and fighting.
Well,
and
hopefully,
we become fighters amongst each other. We need to start united again.
Well, hopefully we can become fighters for a more just society, and use the advent of modern technology while we still can to try and inspire more people to participate and get involved, and recognise that the strength of our common endeavour, the strength we have when we stand in solidarity is phenomenal. And to quote Fred Hampton once again, the leader of the Black Panthers, said that the way to fight racism is with solidarity. And if we can bring about that level of solidarity, then we will be unbeatable.
Yeah.
And obviously you, ANdrea, in what you do, and certainly what you do, Alan and Paul, in terms of the platforms that you're promoting, and indeed the others out there. These, I'm hoping, can only get bigger, can only grow. And if you're watching and you don't already subscribe to The Word, please do, because it's excellent. And similarly, get onto the Labour Heartlands platform and help to spread the word, because we have only got each other. And as I say, when we stand together, we are incredibly powerful. So let's remember that. And as the Black Panthers used to say, power to the people. Thanks for watching and good night.
Good night.